Welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. You know what? Dreams really do come true. At least for Alan Layton, they did. He not only met his idol, he worked for him. The title of his book, 30 Years Behind the Scenes with the Man in Black, Johnny Cash. Music became my life. Alan, take us from the top.
Basically, I started out with Johnny Cash when I was 16, and then spent most of my almost 30 years with him, doing odd things from opening a show for him to sometimes as a backup guitarist. He'll have me, after I would finish, sometimes he'd look at me and say, well, go ahead and go stand beside the bass player and go by there and, play with the band. I said, oh, okay. And then there was the typical go for the type thing, make sure there was coffee. I drove the bus, so did a little bit of everything.
And he was your idol before you even met him.
Yes, yes. And how I met him was the first show I saw of the Johnny Cash show was in Baltimore, Maryland. And my parents paid $7.50 to go see him a piece, and then 3 months later, or a few months later, he came back down to Maryland, and I went to that show, but it was a sold out show, and I couldn't get tickets, but I snuck in, and I snuck in backstage, and that's how I met Johnny Cash in person, and I was freaking out, since I was a huge Johnny Cash fan.
So were you with him through drug addiction, infidelity, legal troubles?
Oh yeah.
He had a rough life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, when I first started with him in the 70s, I started with him in 73, 1973. Um, he was still clean at that time because he cleaned up his act back in the late 60s. And then I didn't see any drug abuse until a little bit later on in the late 70s and 80s. And for whatever reason, and nobody could explain this to anybody, and even to me, why he would just start on pills again. Uh, Luckily for me, as he was older and everything, when he would go back on pills, he would be more like real quiet and to himself and lock himself up in the dressing room and stuff like that. And he wouldn't be seen anywhere, And back in the 50s and 60s, he used to go crazy and tear up hotel rooms and miss concerts and everything. And they go out try to find him and everything. But luckily this time, um, he wasn't as destructive, but he was more like very quiet and aloof and everything. So that's when we didn't bother him at all.
So how do you tell your story?
Okay, at the beginning of my book, it tells you about my childhood, growing up in Texas, being born in Texas, and listening to cross the border stations, Mexican stations with Mexican music and Cajun music out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. And that sort of as a little baby and everything, starting to walk and everything, I would sort of try to dance to the rhythm of the music. So that really got me into the music, And later on, I didn't even know who Johnny Cash was, until probably when I was like 9 or 10. And I happened to discover some 45s in my mom's closet. And she said, yeah, you can play them. By then I was like 9 or 10. And I would play the 45s. And I stumbled on two 45s of Johnny Cash and Tennessee 2 from the Sun record label, where Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins and people like that would first start out with. And I was just totally dumbfounded by that sound that he had. He didn't sound like a country music entertainer to me other than his strong Southern drawl. Basically, I would do like the highs and lows of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And because of his illness, him and June's illness, uh, they retired officially off the road in 1997. But I would still go down to Nashville quite often, to go see them and visit with them at the house and everything. Some of the highlights out of my book, they would have what they call guitar pools at their house, and John and June would call up all these entertainers, and for some reason, I don't know how they did this, but they all knew when a famous legend or famous songwriter was in town for about 2 or 3 weeks, and they would call them up and say, "Hey, I'd like to have we're having a guitar pull at this certain date, and I know you're not doing anything, so come on over." So you never know who would show up at these guitar pulls. And I've been to about 3 of them, and they would feed everybody. And it's amazing just standing there and seeing these legends in rock and roll and country, bluegrass and folk music show up. They would eat, and then they would go in what Johnny and June called the lake room, and they would had chairs set up around in a big circle. There was always June started first, then Johnny, then after Johnny, whoever sitting beside Johnny would sing whatever they wanted to do, one of their hits, or something new or a cover song, and they would go around the circle, and you had to sit in that circle. I had to sit in the circle. My problem was I learned very quickly to always sit at the very end of the circle of chairs, because my mistake for the first show or the second guitar pull was I sat like somewhere in the middle, and there would be someone like Roy Orbison sitting beside me, and then it'd be my turn. And then I would have somebody like Bob Dylan on the other side of me, and I'm looking around like, how am I going to do this? How in the world can I finish? Roy Orbison just finished, and now me, and then there's Bob Dylan or somebody real famous and everything. And so I learned a long time ago to just go ahead and just sit at the very last chair, so I would have to follow whoever was sitting beside me, but the other side, it was just me and that's it. So, I learned a long time ago to not sit somewhere close by like that.
Oh my gosh. Alan, what a story you have.
Oh, yeah.
This would be a great one-man show where you would go out and talk about your experiences with Johnny Cash and play some music and
Right. My wife and I both have been going out, and we touch base with all of our music friends and everything in Nashville, as well as all around the country. And you mentioned about a one-man show type thing. Actually, after John June passed away in 2003, I took a year off, and I started getting phone calls from other musicians, some well-known, some songwriters that's well-known, but, stuff like that. So, hey, man, what are you doing? Nothing. I didn't touch a guitar for a year. And because I was in mourning a little bit, and plus I sort of like figured, well, okay, with Johnny Cash, I was doing 180, 200 shows a year until close to the end in the 90s, and then he slowed down to 120 to 140. So, I figured, well, maybe I could retire and just hang around in Virginia and do some venues and stuff like that. But I got a phone call one day, and it was Sheryl Crow. She called me up. She says, "What's this I hear you're not doing anything? You're not playing anymore." And I said, "Well, yeah, I sort of lost heart and everything." She said, "No, you need to get back on the road." And she's the one that hired me to get me back on the road. And I had to be, for 3 weeks, I had to work with her. on a tour, on an early spring tour in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. So the that sort of got me back on the horse a little bit and everything. And when that would fizzle out a little bit, when people say like, "Hey man, can you fill in for my guitar player? He's sick. Can you?" Yeah, I said, "Yeah, sure, sure, I'll do it." He said, "Well," they would say like, "Well, it might be only for 2 or 3 shows." I said, "That's fine, whatever, you know." But when that would slow down a little bit, I decided to go back on the road as a one-man show, just me and my guitar, and that was it. No band or anything like that. And first half of my show was doing cover songs and a few of mine. Then the last half of the show, I would I would do Johnny Cash songs, and I would tell them stories about how Johnny Cash wrote this in 5 minutes on one of his dining room tables or something like that. Or he's sitting in a den or in his bedroom and he just came up with this song. And it was, and that's how I started doing that. And everybody kept saying, "Well, you need to write a book about all these stories." And I was like, I've never written a book. I don't know. I don't know. And here for the past 3 or 4 years now, every time we would go down to Nashville to the cemetery I would pay my respects to John June at the cemetery. I would lay red roses at their gravesite, and I would run into some of the fans, and and they were like, I said, "Well, are you a big fan?" And, "Oh yeah, yeah, I loved him. I was too young to see him and all this stuff, and wish he was still alive." And I would tell them stories about Johnny Cash, and they said, "Oh man, you need to write a book." And I was like, "I don't know, I don't know." And so
Here
we
you
went,
are. Here you are.
yeah, then I did it. You know, I sat down, and even my wife said, "All these people keep telling you you need to write a book, and tell your story." And I thought, well, yeah. So in 2024, I sat down and started writing the book, and I didn't even know where to start or anything like that. And I sat there and I just thought, well, okay, I was born in Texas, blah blah blah, you know, listening to Wolfman Jack
Oh,
back in the
geez.
50s, and when he was starting out. And I remember when I was real little, Buddy Holly was a local star down in Texas, and he would dress up. I vaguely remember him in like jeans and a Western shirt and with his glasses and everything. And he'd be singing country music songs,
Yeah.
and then he would throw in a couple of his own songs,
Right.
and he did like live commercials for furniture stores and grocery stores and stuff like that, and do a quick little song and stuff like that. I remember all that when I was a
Right.
kid.
Alan Layton, 30 years behind the scenes with the man in black, Johnny Cash. Music became my life. Really a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and I was really excited when I found out that you were going to interview me. So yeah, I thought, oh, this is pretty cool.
Nice. All right. Clifford Mayo is just getting started in his career as a mental health professional, but already he feels he has insight he needs to share, hence his book. So you want to work in mental health? The good, the bad, and the unforgettable. Where are you in your journey, Clifford?
After I left direct care, around the end of the book, I discuss how I took the opportunity to go into a state level admin position. So I'm currently working in mental health grants for the state of Arizona.
Oh,
So I still work in mental health, just more of the admin oversight, and I had to take a step back from direct care. Really, that's kind of where the book kind of stemmed from, was me processing the 10 years I spent in the field. And
10
all the
years?
trauma. Yes, ma'am. I started as a driver. I Before I worked in the field, I was a Pizza Hut delivery driver for 10 years before that. My spouse and I at the time, she had gotten pregnant, and I needed a job with some benefits. And so I found another driver position at a place here in town, and it had benefits. I'm like, awesome. I had no clue what I was walking into on my first day. I knew it was taking people to and from their appointments. I did not know it was 100% mental health at the time. So when I went in just raring to go, and then got this big surprise at some of the things that you see or you deal with as a driver. And after that, I stayed for about a year and a half, and then I moved up to front desk, like just receptionist. And then I took a clinical position. I got offered a case manager position after helping a client get into a substance abuse residential. As just the front desk person, I was able to complete all the paperwork, get it all in. So they offered me a clinical position. And from there, it kind of just took off. I decided to get my degree and become a therapist. So now I am a licensed associate counselor for the state of Arizona, and I'm working on starting my private practice. As far as going back to community mental health, that's could be possible in the future, but having state benefits is not something you can just walk away from. So private practice is where it's at.
Right. So you sound like a pretty young guy. You're really just getting started.
I am 39.
You're a young guy. You're just getting started.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I'm looking at this book going, so you want to work in mental health. You've barely begun. What made you write this book?
So after I took the state admin position, I had realized how much I had gone through, and I did not process myself, whether it was clients passing away, whether it's overdose, anything of that manner. All that trauma that just you take on as a therapist or as a crisis worker, you just take it all on, and there's not a lot of places to put it. So after a while, it just started weighing on me and weighing on me and weighing on me. And that's when the state admin position came available. And I'm like, I got to take this. My wife suggested I start journaling my experiences, start journaling how they made me feel, to try to process all the traumas that I went through as a crisis interventionist. And after a while, it just kind of started flowing like I was speaking to somebody, and then telling them a story in their perspective. One day, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, I hear you have a lot of direct care experience." I said, "Yeah, enough to write a book." And that was the connection for me. That was the connection of reword things, change names, restructure it into a book that somebody else could read and learn about what the field is actually like. Another thing that sparked me was I got on social media. I was looking for like-minded individuals who had struggled through the field and someone I can relate to. And I started realizing most people had no clue what they were getting themselves into when they started in this field. They assumed, I'm going to get my master's degree, I'm going to become a therapist. It's all about being a therapist. But community mental health is not about that. Community mental health is really grinding down into the dirty of everything. It's not just therapy. It's a lot of politics. It's a lot of trauma. It's a lot of fighting to get somebody into a place, the type of care that they need, advocating for people. And a lot of people just struggled with that, I noticed. And after a while, they just got burnt out. And then they started hating the field. They would see posts on Facebook about how much they loved the field, but have to walk away from their job and go get a job at Walmart or McDonald's with a master's degree. And it's kind of made me realize, I think some people just need to heads up, know what they're walking into before they do it. Because if you know what you're walking into before you go, you can be prepared for it. That was my biggest inspiration for the book.
Well, when you talk about the crisis, give me an example.
Well, in the book, I discuss many different situations. One specific situation was about a client who consistently calls in with thoughts of harming themselves or suicidal ideations. And one day he didn't make his appointment. And that was very strange for us at the office, because even though this person was under what we call the Title 36 court order treatment, they always showed up to their appointments. They were engaged, they were good, but this time it didn't happen. And I had a gut feeling. So I went to the house, I knocked on the door, tried calling, nothing. Another day went by, banging on the door, nothing. The third day I asked my boss and I say, look, it's been 3 days. I'm getting really worried. We haven't heard from this person. I know that people miss their appointments all the time, but I'm getting concerned. May I call the police to get a welfare check? She goes, let's go one more day, 72 hours, and then we'll call. Well, the next morning I go down there and the coroner's office was already there. And they had stopped me before I got to the door to let me know what was going on. And that scenario honestly really broke me. In that time, I had taken after that, I'd taken another position in a different clinic to try to get away from the certain environment that I was in. And it wasn't even the work environment. It was strictly just the trauma that I had gone through. And I just needed a change. That's something that I know many people have gone through. Personally, I've lost many clients as a crisis worker, and I wanted to be able to show people what we actually go through.
Do you find coping mechanisms?
Oh, absolutely. Personally, my coping mechanism outside of writing the book, I'm very big with doing things with my hands. So whether it's tinkering, or my wife got me into Legos, building Legos for her clients and her offices. Anything to keep you present in the moment and not focused on the things that happened in the past is really kind of that day-to-day coping skill that I use.
I mean, do you really ever get over it?
Get over it? I think that's a strong word.
It's a harsh term, isn't it? Get over it.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to say you get past the pain of it. Yes. You start to become a little bit numb to it. Yes. But you never really get over it, because in this field, we all get in this field because we care and we have so much empathy. So I will always remember those faces, and I will always remember the feelings I got when they told me that they were gone. But it doesn't bring me as much pain as it used to. I have processed that. So I've gotten past the emotional part of it, but the remembrance and the empathy, that will always be there.
Where do you go to find people who are interested in this field, but maybe don't know exactly what they're getting in for? I mean, that's the whole reason you wrote this book. How do you get to those people?
So my biggest way right now is through social media. I have learned that through TikTok, through Facebook, through all those, a lot of people working in this field have really reached out to the masses that way. And that's really kind of where a lot of my inspiration has come from, is from that. So that's been my biggest way, is to reach out through them, through social media, because there's 50 states in America. So it's not just the state I'm in.
Are you going to keep writing?
I am going to keep writing. However, my next book is not an addition to the memoir. It's actually more of a psychological thriller fiction book that I am roughly about halfway through.
Okay. Before I let you go, I have to ask you, I guess you would recommend writing as a way to deal with your trauma.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, any kind of journaling, even if nobody ever reads it, just writing down the things that go on in your head, it brings that same feeling as talking it out with somebody, because you're putting it down. It becomes real. It's words in front of you. And when that happens, it gives you that opportunity to really process what's going on.
All right.
I've actually, as soon as it was released, I created my own marketing kit and press release, and I sent everything out to all the colleges that I was, like all the ones in Arizona at first, in California, just to all the people within the psychology or behavioral health departments. And I just blast email from any public facing email I can get. I would really love it if students got a hold of my book. Yeah. That would be a way for them to know what they're walking into before they do.
All right. Clifford Mayo, author of So You Want to Work in Mental Health? The Good, the Bad, and the Unforgettable. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you can. That's the message in Tom Bowen's book, The Balanced Leader. If I can do it, you can too. A regular guy's leadership journey and lessons for all. Tom, you're a COO with a major insurance company.
Yeah, I wanted to write my story because I just figured I was an average guy who actually had some success. And I always got inspiration from folks that I considered self-made. And, I kind of put myself in that category and just, if a regular guy could make it, why couldn't somebody else? And I always like to write. I was a sports editor of my high school paper. I wrote a company newsletter for a while I was in college and always enjoyed writing.
Oh, okay. So you retired and you had the time to put it all together.
Yes.
Who were you thinking about when you were writing this book?
Mostly, emerging leaders and aspiring leaders, folks that are somewhere along the way in their leadership journey. Because, I talked about, it's an autobiography of sorts, but I tie things back to kind of moments of truth and where I felt like maybe I had the qualities of a leader, or there was something inside of me that I could become a leader. And then the second part of the book is really kind of my lessons and things that I did and found success with that, if people want to take a look and use those tidbits as something that may help them, then that was my secondary purpose as well. So
when did you kind of have a feeling you would be a good leader?
When I was younger, I always felt like I could stand up for myself. And, growing up in New York, I grew up in Woodhaven, Queens, before we moved to California, before high school or middle school. I don't know. I just felt like I could stand on my own 2 feet. I was my own man. And then I really think that kind of came together when I was in college and joined a fraternity and just really took on leadership roles. I wanted to organize the sports teams. I was, on a couple of committees, and I was social chairman. And, in a fraternity, that's a pretty important job.
That is the job.
the guy planning the parties and trying to, have parties with the right sororities.
Right.
But I always felt like I had a knack, for it. I felt I could get people engaged, make them laugh a little bit at times. And then when I went to, I got hired by Chubb, and I went to the Chubb School of Insurance. I really felt like I stacked up well. I went to a state school and had to put myself through school. I had great parents and whatnot, but we didn't have a lot of means. But when I got to Chubb and I saw where I stacked up against folks that went to, a lot of big, Ivy League type of schools or schools that were much more prominent, I felt like, what, I can do this. And then through my leadership experience at Chubb and doing the Chubb, insurance school, pretty much finished at the top. I did finish at the top of my class there. And I thought, what, I can do this. I'm as good as anybody. And then I really loved, the whole aspect of leadership. I love being responsible. And I was a communications major in college. And, I think a lot of business majors would say, oh, that's not a great major for business. I totally disagree. I felt like being a communications major was key because, I was a pretty good writer. I was comfortable talking in front of groups. And I always figured I could learn the business or aspects of the business no matter what came to me.
And you wanted to pay it forward. I think that's important. Like you felt the need. Yeah. It wasn't just all about you.
Yeah, I still feel that way. I still do. Every 2 weeks, I do LinkedIn tidbits kind of, one, I enjoy staying engaged. I retired at 60 and retired voluntarily at 60 because I wanted to spend time with my family and grandkids. And, I had the means to do so. But I still do videos because I love the engagement. I love talking to people. And I do coach and mentor a few people, just pro bono, nothing. I don't want to have a business or run a business. And I think that's important to pay it forward because in my book, I talked about, people who influenced me and people who gave me the opportunity, by giving me their time and their wisdom. And I feel like that's really important for somebody because sometimes I think leaders just need a push or a little nudge. They have it inside of them, and they might not necessarily know that.
Did you have any difficulties along the way?
Yeah, definitely. When I was a young man, when I was putting myself through college, I worked night crew. So balancing working nights and trying to get to class and trying to be, a set aside time to study was certainly difficult. A lot of folks that I went to college with, they didn't have to work, or they, had school paid for and whatnot. I thought that was a challenge for me. I didn't feel like I was disadvantaged by any other means, but I just felt like putting myself through school and, fighting through the sleep deprivation and whatnot was a real challenge. And then when I did get out and I did get, on my feet, we all have difficulties one way or another. And whether it's, struggling to figure out where you fit in a company, or if you really can do it. I think with every little success that I built along the way, I think I overcame difficulties. And when I was with Chubb, at the first 10 years of my career, you move up by, moving physically to locations where they have an opening. So you have to kind of reinvent yourself or make sure you fit in. So those are difficult things where you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing, but I'm the new guy in the branch and the site, and I need to establish myself and have everybody to see me with credibility. And so those were difficult, but that was part of the gig. I mean, I did enjoy that as well. So I don't think I had any more difficulties than anybody along the way, except for getting to that point, working my way through school.
And somewhere along the way, were you always a musician?
No, I love music. I love music, and I'm pretty good at like name. People are like, "Wow, you're really good at like the name that tune stuff." People are like, "How do you know?" I go, "I don't know why I remember this stuff." But I always felt like I had a soundtrack playing in my head, so that's why I applied some of those things into the book and songs that, take me back and actually help me recount and remember some of the things, over the years, that made for a book that was, I thought pretty well detailed as far as my story. But I don't know, 30 or so years ago, I decided I want to get a guitar. So I took a couple of lessons, and it took me a while. And I do still play. I'm not very good, but I enjoy it.
Give me an example of a soundtrack of your life.
One would be "Take It Easy" by the Eagles. I enjoyed music like that growing up. I enjoyed the Beatles, and I still do, and my kids actually still enjoy it because I remember those things playing in the car. I think a lot of songs that were playing, when you were a kid sitting in Dad's car, and just some off the beaten path songs as well. And then into the 80s, it was like some of the new wave stuff, and but I go back to like classic rock a lot because that was really what was happening when I was, growing up in my teen years. Eagles, Foreigner, Styx, groups like that, Journey. Those are the songs that really, when I hear them, it takes me back to my youth and to my, teen years and 20s, and those are probably the ones that really resonate with me.
Very creative, Tom. You going to keep writing?
I am. I actually have outlined another book. Not sure if I'm going to do it, but basically it's, the leadership playbook, and in parentheses, there is no playbook. Basically, just some thoughts around, leadership. And I think that you can give people guidelines to leadership, but they have to figure out their way. I mean, I read something once where, and I have two boys in the military, that military leaders, it's 50-50, introverts and extroverts. And you think about that, it's like, wow, in the military, 50-50, introverts and extroverts. You would think they'd all be extroverts. Well, I have a son who's a Marine captain. He's pretty much an introvert. And I have an Air Force son who's a captain and a pilot, and he's an extrovert. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
All right. How you telling people about this book? You sound like you're still pretty connected. You're connected on LinkedIn. You're connected to people you worked with. You mentor people.
Yeah, it's mostly LinkedIn. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from that. My wife actually posted something some months back on our Facebook page, and but I think it's mostly been LinkedIn. LinkedIn's actually pretty good. I've got a fair amount of followers or connections on LinkedIn, and I get pretty good engagement Then I've had some people reach out to me who bought the book that said they'd like me to speak to some of their folks in, as soon as they can get some time. A guy that I knew from back in high school is actually a really good friend of my brother's, who bought a bunch of copies of the book, or like 6 or 8 copies of the book, and said he wanted me to meet with him and his team and, talk about that. So those are giving me some leads and some connections. And, I wrote the book not to sell books, but just to tell my story. And if it could help a few people, that's what I really wanted to do.
That's great. Tom Bohen, author of The Balanced Leader. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Charles Porta is a behavioral health therapist, and he helps find housing and mental health services for the homeless. Charles, the name of your book is Pure Evil. Did what you do for a living play into this at all?
Basically, one thing, I wrote it because when I wrote it at the time, I was a case manager, and I was going through I worked in the Tenderloin, 6th Street, the really bad areas of San Francisco. I saw a lot of really bad things, and I thought one day of writing a book, but not about what I see, but that's the environment where it would take place. But I thought, because I always loved horror books too, and scary things. I always like whodunits and murder mysteries, and I love when at the end when they reveal it all at the end. I also like to know the mind, what created this stuff. How did someone get this way? That's became a therapist, and so I thought of bringing that to the book. But then I also said I want to create a character. The main character is someone who does good things, helps people, but he's not the conventional suit and tie person. Instead of a suit and tie, he wears rock and roll stuff and gothic stuff and rings and all that stuff. But they are a good person, which came into another thing. I said I wanted to create a character that says, you can't judge people by the way they look, because that's what we seem to be doing all the time. Some of the biggest monsters wear a suit and tie, and some of the nicest people don't wear suits and ties.
How long ago did you write this?
A year ago. I wrote it basically because in 2024, I lost my job, and I had basically no income. And I said, okay, we always wanted to write a book. This is it, because the job market's getting worse. And so we decided to write the book.
Well, tell me what you came up with.
Basically, there's about 7 of them. There's going to be about 15 stories. I came up with a character, and the characters are all based on my friends. I pretty much put all my friends as the characters. I came up with a detective. He's from SFPD. He's a detective. He likes gothic stuff. He wears like gothic t-shirts, rings, all that stuff to work. He has a dog, his little Jimmy. That's my dog. That's little Jimmy. I gave him a partner and all his friends, and I basically said, you're born and raised in San Francisco, so I'm going to put all the different areas of the city with the gothic undertones and he's going to go out and investigate all the weird stuff that happens in the city, the weird things that go on in San Francisco, but they're going to have very supernatural serial killer undertones. And so that's where the character came up. And while I did this, since I have a background in psychology, I thought, while you're doing that, we'll also write where the killer came from, or the killers, whoever they are, or a monster, wherever it came from.
Well, tell me about this killer, what he's doing. He's targeting women in San Francisco.
Yeah,
and he drains the blood of his victims.
He targets them. There's a reason why he has a specific way he targets. If I was to give out why I can't give out that information. That's pretty much why he's doing it. But there's a certain thing each victim has that he wants, and there's a reason why he's doing it. It's basically keep him alive. He has to stay alive to do this because it's something that happened. Because he's basically the killer. He looks human, but he's really not human. He's a creation of something else that happened a long time ago. And so he does this to stay alive, and he targets the victims based on one single characteristic, which the detective, if he finds that, he'll find what he's looking for, but he has to. And then when I thought of the killer, this is ironic, but I thought of my boss who fired me during Christmas, and I said, that's the person. Looks exactly like him. That's the person I would use. He's very quiet and mousy, but he's actually a true monster underneath it.
Okay, and we also have a love interest, the seductive Asia Francisco.
Yes, she is a forensics expert. She's written like Abby. I got her from Abby of NCIS, written exactly. Gothic lady who's very smart. She likes incense, heavy metal, rock and roll concerts. Very kind person, very gentle, sweet person. But She doesn't go to work once again with the dress. She goes to work with all her gothic stuff and makeup and everything. And I gave him a dog, little Jimmy,
Okay.
which is actually my dog. My exact dog.
So they are searching for this disturbed, demented monster, and you've got other characters that are helping along the way, and you
Yep.
have enough for 15 books, is what you're
I
saying?
know. And yep, in fact, I'm working on book number 2. It's called Dreamweaver. And this story, it's about the detectives. He's at it again, but this time somebody's kidnapping people at random. I'm not going to say why, but this person's kidnapping them and doing something else. And he's kidnapping them and trying to do something. Trying to get something he never had, this person.
Do we catch this guy in pure evil?
Yes, no sooner than that person's gone in book 2, well, here comes another one.
Another nut job.
Another nut job. There's about 15 nut jobs that I have in the head. Like part 3 is going to be about a person who's also to be taken. Part 4 is going to be about a person who adopts people's identities.
Oh my gosh, you are something else. Okay, so how are you promoting your book? How are you telling people about this?
First of all, I use the computer. A lot of people I've friended who I used to work with are on the computer, and so I have a huge friend base. And so those I send it out to them, and they tell their friends. I also have several bookstores that I'm promoting at, like when Barnes and Noble. A lot of them are in San Francisco, but the newest, what I've done now is I've signed with a group called Olympic Story House, and they're taking the book to other cities, and they're taking it to the Hollywood. They're talking about movie rights and television shows. And they're taking it to like Times Square and all those other places I can't get to. And the big book companies like Penguin, HarperCollins, Penguin, those kind of book places, the big ones.
Okay, and you're paying for that. That's like an extra.
Yeah, that's an extra. It's a big extra, but we have the money to do it.
That's great. Good for you.
The next thing we're also doing is I'm trying to find someone, because I went to something called Fan Expo in San Francisco, which was basically comic books, and I found people who do like t-shirts and stuff. So I'm asking someone to take this. There's 3 main characters. The first main character is the detective. Second is his love interest. Now the third one is called Pitbull Feliciano. He's the main character's one of his closest friends, but this person's ex-military, and they have their own security firm. So this person helps Draven find the killers, because there's little things that he misses.
All right, so you're going to get some t-shirts going. You're using social media. You've hired an outside company. You're on your way.
Yep, they're promote. They told the company, like, if you want to make money, I want to make money, because I am looking at on the truth. I told them I'm looking for, if I time it right, in 5 years I'll have my pension, and in 5 years, if this really works, we'll be a multimillionaire with the book. We'll have a lot of money to relax, and because I also have what they call a really, really bad lower back with the crushed vertebrae.
Oh, geez.
From when I used to help the LGBT and women's rights back in 2000 when the Bush 2 presidency.
Okay.
And transgender rights, that was a big one. We were very big on transgender rights. And
why don't you just write about your life?
that's what my friend said. My friend who's transgender, she said, you should write all your adventures in life, because it was something else. It was something. You come from a big city, growing up in San Francisco. What was it like with under the backdrop of Trump's presidency and Bush 2's presidency? That alone will be a book and a half.
Yeah.
And all the protesting you guys did to stop a lot of, like, the legal wars and all the other stuff, gay rights, all that other stuff you guys did.
All good. All good stuff.
You can even write about how when Trump tried to invade San Francisco and the Bay Area.
I have to move on, but you are a fascinating person. Charles Porta, author of Pure Evil.
Yep.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Okay, cool. Nice to meet you too. Well, take care.
Atlantis McKenna has written short stories and poems over the years, but Urdu is her first published book. It was 30 years in development, and now she's got 5 more books ready to go. Your pen name is Adam. What does that stand for?
That's my initials. My full name is Atlantis Tiki Olsen McKenna.
Okay. What made you decide to put this out?
Well, I'm getting older now, and I've been germinating this idea for like 30 years or so. Then I hit a place where I had hit the zone. I was in a contract in California. I landed in a home with a very young man with a great deal of ambition and energy and all the right, vibes going. Nothing standing around to distract me. So I started putting it together and sharpening it up.
Tell me about Urdu.
Urdu is he's born into a kingdom, rich, powerful. He's like a lesser prince. From a very young age, he resembles somebody famous, and he was born to right or wrong that kingdom did to the place he's going to. So his father spends time honing him, trying to awaken him. He finally gets the call, so Daddy sends him off, and you follow him if you read the book. You follow him from that point when he comes from that dysfunctional family, and he's going toward another dysfunctional family. And along the way, he has problems. He has a kingdom he's going to. He's supposed to be a king too, but it's jacked up. So he's trying to figure out how to fix it. So he's stopping along the way, trying to visit with old friends he's met over the years and trying to get them to go there. He hits a block, melts down. And along the way, he beats up a bunch of bandits. He rescues a woman from being raped and murdered, and he collects a bunch of golden wools. And then he finds what he needs on the way. But then he finds also that there's challenges to that. He finds that the people that he's going to save, not all of them are actually into it. They blame each other a lot for what has happened in the past, and there's no reason for it. But he manages to get through. He gets to his kingdom. He delivers his packages. He comes in on great fanfare and whatnot, and then he meets his bride, who promptly tries to kill him.
Oh, geez. Where do you come up with this stuff?
I have no idea. In the beginning, it was a very two-dimensional story, but I was 20-something when I started thinking about it. Now I'm older. I know more about people. I've met a great abundance of people. So some of the characters are taken from personality types I've met over the years. And then other things just come to me. Sometimes when I'm writing, it looks like a movie is playing in my head. So I can see it happening. And I just write down what I'm seeing. The first person I gave my book to was my son, and it took me forever to make him read it. When he got to the end of it, he decided to ask me, where is the next one? You're not going to leave it like that, are you? So it must be okay, because he's not the target audience.
Who's the target audience?
We're talking about women mostly, 25 or so, maybe a little older.
Why?
Younger women might, because it's a story basically about how women are jacked over. And in the end, this guy is coming into this kingdom. He thinks he's supposed to be rescuing the women, and then he finds out that they've been rescuing themselves for ages.
And they don't need his help.
One of them don't need his help, but they live in a world where they need a man. So he has been sent by their goddess to deliver them. But the problem is that somebody had already been there delivering them, and he doesn't find that out until the end of the book. But it's an Earth-like area, right around the 11th century or so. There's a lot going on. You're not following just Urdu. You're following the other people that are meant to help fulfill this prophecy. So there's a lot of moving parts. You have the nation that formed out of the broken remains of the nation that was destroyed is across the mountain. They have to come into it because they're part of the problem. Then we have the heroine who's supposed to deliver the girl to Jofil and be her side and her guardian. And those are stories that have to be told, and then you have to have a little bit of background for why all of this crap is going on.
Now, your son says you can't leave it here, so are you going to leave it here or what? What are you going to do?
No, the second book is already written, and I'm doing my last edits now before I put in for the copyright.
Now, you tried to get an agent before you decided to go with Fulton, right?
I shopped this idea around, and I've had other people tell me it's a great idea. But when I tried to send, samples out to various agents and whatnot, I get it back that, oh, this is not what we're looking for, but what they're looking for is a young, attractive person. The book market has gotten very nichey, so a lot of people have great ideas, but they'll never get out there because the gatekeepers aren't interested. The gatekeepers are trying to generate an avalanche.
Yeah, that's why we have publishers like Page and Fulton. So what's your message?
When you have problems, you have to face them. You have to deal with what's in front of you. And when you get help, take it. Appreciate what's offered to you, and then move ahead, because dwelling in the past will only cause problems.
Great. Adam, author of Or Do. Thanks so much for talking to me.
All righty. You have a good day.